Hello, my name is John Burras. I'd like to thank you for watching this video today. This is a short video called What is Fascia? In this video, it's the first in a series showing you how the fascia in the human body is incredibly important and how for most of our lives we've missed it. And so I'm hoping to share with you some wonderful ideas about how to keep your fascia healthy, how to keep your bodies healthy, and then showing you how fascia is one of the most important tissues in the entire body, and there's lots of great ways to keep your body healthy by supporting your fascia. So let's talk a little bit about the human body and the tissues themselves first. So the human body is pretty simple. There's only 4 essential tissues in the human body. First, there's muscle cells, and muscles can be divided into many different parts. First of all, you have the heart muscle. And what makes the heart muscle unique is that all the fibers contract at the same time. Then there's other types of muscle called the smooth muscle that goes. You have the muscles that support the movement of the body, skeletal muscle. Then the smooth muscle is the muscle that encases your organs. So those are the 3 types of muscle. Then you have epithelial cells, which are cells on the outside of your skin and your stomach lining inside your mouth, and those are essentially dead on the outside and living on the inside. Then you have nerves, which conduct all the electrical components of the body and make us move, make things happen. And the 4th type of tissue is connective tissue. Connective tissue consists of ligaments, tendons, bone, and fascia. They're all the same. So there's some unique components of connective tissue. It's not studied very much, or not enough, I would say, and it's really important. So fascia is one type of connective tissue in the body. So what makes connective tissue unique, especially fascia? Well, one thing that's unique about it is it changes shape. It likes to be in a liquid, flexible state, but what happens to most of us over time, it becomes rigid, dried out, and solid, and it loses its elasticity. So we try to keep the fascia in a liquid, soft state, and that's part of why I'm here today, to share with you how to do that. So fascia and all connective tissue change shape. They can get better, they can get worse. Most people have fascia that gets worse over time not because of age, but because what they're doing is the age. So fascia can change shape, and you can also improve your fascia too. Things like yoga and body work are great ways to change the fascia themselves. So fascia changes shape. There's also some unique components about fascia. It holds us up. It keeps us upright. It keeps our body together. It's like the membranes that hold everything together so we don't fall out and fall down and everything leaks out. So fascia, it keeps us upright. It holds us together. It changes shape. There's lots of great things that fascia does that we're not really aware of. Another way to think about fascia is it's like a gelatin mold, where when it's warm, it's liquid, and it stays soft and liquidy, like in a young 2-year-old body. Your fascia is soft and liquid. Babies, when they fall down, they'll bounce. We get older, our fascia dries out, it cools off, it hardens, and we don't bounce anymore, we break. So the fascia is designed to be cool and liquid, but what happens is it starts to dry out. So you take a gelatin mold and you put it in the refrigerator and it cools off, it gets hard. You put it back on the stove in a pot and you heat it up, it liquefies and it melts. So when the fascia is warm and liquid, it's healthy. When it's hard and dried out, it's unhealthy. And most of us, through our lifetime, our fascia begins to dry out and harden. There'll be a video coming soon about fascia and aging. We'll talk more about that. But think about fascia as a gelatin mold where it's mostly liquid. And it's supposed to be liquid in our lifetime, but most people, their fascia dries out and it hardens and it becomes like beef jerky. I also like to think about fascia like a big piece of saran wrap that wraps through the entire body. And it goes from the tips of your toes to the top of your head, and it travels in every corner of the body. and it encases everything. And if one part is tight, perhaps in your ankle, and it pulls into your knee and pulls into your hip, it's the same line of fascia. It just keeps traveling through the body in different layers and different directions. And the fascia starts to harden over time, and it starts to degenerate. Another way to look at fascia is muscle is separated into lots of different fibers, kind of like these pencils. They're called myofibrils. Every one of these myofibrils is covered in fascia. And then all of them are wrapped around there in the end to encase the muscle tissue itself. So fascia doesn't just go around the muscle, it goes through the muscle. It encases the entire muscle in fascia, and it wraps through and around the muscle. So the muscle tissue itself, like these pencils, is encased in fascia. Fascia also wraps around and goes through bone. It's what's called the periosteum. So in order for the bone to be healthy, the fascia needs to be healthy. They work in conjunction with each other. There will be a video coming soon about fascia and bone health. But just for starters here, your fascia is what anchors to the bone, not the muscle itself. And the fascia has many important qualities that keep your bone healthy. So we see that fascia has many characteristics. Fascia is also part of your immune system. Fascia is now considered the largest organ in the body. It has cells in it called macrophages and other things that kill cancers. It kills viruses, fungus, bacteria that are stuck in the tissue. So when your fascia is healthy, it contains disease. When your fascia is unhealthy, it starts to spread the disease through your body. So it's important to keep your fascia healthy and liquid to keep your immune system healthy, because it's a big part of your immune system. And here's the gelatin mold concept of fascia. Remember, fascia likes to be liquid and warm. So when you're doing the proper type of exercise, you keep the muscles warm and keeps the fascia warm. Fascia doesn't move by itself. It needs the muscles to move it. So when the fascia is healthy, it's like a gelatin mold. It's a liquid state that's flexible. It has fibers in it that keep it hard, and it keeps it flexible. The collagen fibers give it firmness and strength. The elastin fibers give it flexibility. So those two fibers create a tissue that supports us and holds us up and keeps us healthy at the same time. Somewhat like a gelatin mold, you want to keep your fascia liquid and soft. And here's a picture of a loofah sponge. You see how it goes every which way. If we were to melt somehow the bones and the muscles and the nerves in the side of the human body, what would be left is this network of fascia running in every direction, encasing everything like this loofah sponge. It's just very elaborate, running here and there and going everywhere in the body. Another way to envision fascia is like the white stuff in an orange. When you peel open an orange, you see a lot of orange material. That would be like the muscle in the body. Then you see all the white material, the fibers that hold it all together. That would be like the fascia in the body. So you see how the fascia just goes everywhere. If you were to squeeze the orange juice out of the orange, what would you have left was basically this interweaved white fibers. That's the fascia in the body. All the white fibers and membranes that basically hold us all together, keep us intact, keep us upright, and whatnot. So a lot of what I like to think about is the body is much like an orange. The fascia being the white stuff in the orange. When you look at the totality of the body, the fascia begins at the very bottom of your feet and travels through the body and all the way up to the top of your head. It's the same interconnected fascia, so if you're having a problem in your foot, it could end up in your knee or your hip or your back or your shoulder. So if this sheet of saran wrap here is the continuous layer of fascia traveling through your body, for example. And it goes all the way through and it will continue all the way up. So let's say at 10 years old you have an ankle sprain and it never gets healed. And the fascia tissue hardens and it dries out and it causes an imbalance way down here in your ankle. Well, it's going to cause a rotation as it pulls on the fascia through the lower leg, through the knee, twisting the hip, and end up in your hip and your back. So it's one continuous layer of tissue, and it doesn't just end. And so an injury in one area is going to show up in another area. And people aren't necessarily aware of that because that's not how we're taught to think about the body. Most of our injuries never really go away. We just tend to build muscle on top of things, or we just walk it off or shake it off, but it's still there. Then years later it shows up again as the fascia becomes hampered and twisted and torqued. It ends up in different areas of the body, and people can't figure out all of a sudden why they have a back problem, or all of a sudden they have a knee problem, they need surgery because they have bone on bone. In most cases, it's because the fascia someplace else is too hard and tight. It's affecting other areas of the body. So it's important to have a working grasp of fascia and how it affects us as we go through life. So here's another model showing you how the fascia travels through the body, and in one area, if you have tight, hard fascia, it affects the other area. So once again, let's say you have tight shins from running or too much exercise or old high ankle sprains. It starts to tighten up down here. And you see, as it tightens up down here, it starts to pull your hip out of whack. Your hip's out of whack. As your hip comes out of whack, it's going to start to affect your neck. And all this is related because it all works together. So your shoulders could be affected. See how the shoulders and neck move because the hips are off? Your knees could be off. So as the fascia travels through the body, it pulls on other areas because it's one continuous sheet of tissue. So an injury in your hamstring might affect your shoulder as things get torqued, or you might start having a neck problem because the fascia is pulling from your lower back. So think about the fascia as a continuous network of saran wrap that travels through the body, and when one area is affected, other areas will be affected as well. So that's an important concept to remember. Here is a depiction of what it might look like if a skeleton were stretching in a yoga pose. And you see how from the wrist to the shoulder, through the elbow and the rib cage all the way into the back, there's a line of stretch. So in yoga, we call them lines of stretch or coming into alignment as all the fascia in that direct line is stretched. So one of the ways to keep your fascia healthy is stretch along these lines through the body. Another way to think about the body is mostly like a tree. And the tree has rings, and the oldest rings are on the inside and the youngest rings are on the outside. We're much the same. We're a series of layers. And the fascia creates layers and layers and layers. Most people spend the majority of their life creating more layers. It's called strength training. Putting on layers on top of old layers and getting harder and tighter. But the body is essentially a series of layers that want to be peeled away. So it doesn't do any good just by sticking your elbow in somebody's back because you're not separating the layers. And in order to do, I call it effective body work or even effective yoga therapy, you need to start peeling away the layers. You can't get all the layers at once. You have to peel them away to get to the source of things. Sometimes people's problems are many layers deep. They're not on the outside. So the fascia creates a layering system of the body that needs to be peeled away layer by layer. When we talk about the pathology of fascia, this picture would emphasize somebody who was involved in a car crash or a bicycle crash or a skiing crash, where the energy gets stuck in the fascia in a pattern, kind of like a paintball hitting a wall and spreading out. and the fascia becomes glued together in a specific pattern. And people feel they would always say, well, my left side's always my worst, or my right side is always my worst. Well, this is why, because the impact of trauma, like in a crash, will tend to fuse the fascia together over time. And for most people, since they don't do the proper work to get rid of it, this is what their body ends up like, and they can feel it, they just can't identify it, because the fascia has glued together because the impact trauma has settled in. So that's essentially the anatomy of fascia. So what happens to our fascia, especially as we get older? There's about 5 things that happen. And they don't have to happen. If we learn how to correctly take care of our bodies early on, we wouldn't have to experience that. But here's the 5 things that happen. First is lack of movement. When you move your body, your muscles stay warm, the fascia will stay warm with the body and keep in a liquid, warm, gelatin-like state. So lack of movement for many people is one of the reasons why their fascia hardens. It's called hydrogen bonding, where the tissues actually start to fuse together. Much like if you kept a stack of newspapers in your garage for years and then tried to separate them, they'll fuse together. Well, that's what happens to our body. We fuse together from lack of movement. The second thing is stress. Stress is a force in life. It's fear. So when you're constantly in a fear state, it's called the fight or flight reaction. One of the things your body does, it tightens up and it hardens. And that's from fear, or what we call stress. So people who are mostly stressed out all the time will have a tighter, harder body, because that's their reaction to stress. Another thing that happens is trauma. Trauma is anything from accidents to car crashes to falls. Most of us aren't taught how to correctly repair our trauma. We just build muscle on top of it and harden around it, and the trauma is still there. So that doesn't necessarily correct the fascia tissue, and over time the fascia is going to get harder and start to pull on other areas that are affected. So trauma is also settles into the body. There's also something called repression. So we've heard about expression. When you use your muscles to express emotion, like in a smile, a laugh, you're letting the fascia be normal and healthy. But when you hold back emotion, you won't let it out, you're also using those same muscles to hold back emotion, and then the fascia will harden and tighten as well. That's why you see so many people with wrinkled faces and wrinkled necks, because they're holding back emotion using their muscles and their fascia. And the 5th way that our body hardens, if the fascia hardens, is through fitness. People don't realize fitness is a degenerative system. It wears your body down over time if that's all you do. For instance, most people will say, well, how do you stay healthy? Well, I go to the gym 6 days a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I lift weights for my lower body. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I lift weights for my upper body. All that does is tighten and harden your tissues over time, and your fascia wears out because it doesn't like to be that hard and tight and dried out. So the whole fitness experience is wearing us down. I hear so many people who are 40, 50, 60 saying, I'm just so tired. I'm worn out, because they've been working out for their lifetime, and it's caused their fascia to harden and dry out and tighten. Even though they think they're doing the right things, they're just drying their bodies out, and they're losing energy in that respect. So those are the 5 ways that the body, it loses its fascia. So now that we know this, are we changing this? Well, not necessarily. We live in a muscle culture, and that's the fact. We live in a muscle-dominated culture where people want more muscle. They want more tightness, they want more hardness, they want more dried out bodies. That's the culture, from the medical science to the doctors to the physical therapists to the trainers to the media. They're trying to push us into more muscle. It's a muscle culture. And people don't realize how many bad things are happening because of that. It's a muscle industrial complex. When we look at the history of anatomy, Anatomy was created essentially in the Western world anyways by medical doctors who are in the morgues and the basements of hospitals in Europe, most likely. And they, 200 years ago, were cutting up dead bodies. And they pretty much ignored the fascia. They just cut right through it, ignored it, just wanted to get to the organs, the brain, the heart. So for centuries, doctors have been looking at fascia and pretty much ignored it, going, oh, that's just waste material. We're just going to cut through that and get rid of that, and then we'll get on to the other important stuff. So in most of our culture, fascia has been completely ignored and disrespected. It's probably the most disrespected tissue in the entire body. And so that's the state we're in these days. Now that's changing because as doctors taught us about muscles and bones for centuries, it's now body workers and yoga teachers are teaching doctors about fascia and alignment and a healthy body. So a yoga teacher is learning anatomy in a living classroom with living bodies, not in a morgue somewhere cutting up dead bodies. And that's the distinction. Fascia is a living tissue and it can only be studied in a great way with living bodies, and you can show the difference there. So the times are changing. Fascia is becoming more of a common term these days. You're going to see more books written about it, more television programs written about it, as it becomes more and more important. So there's a seismic shift happening in the world these days with fascia. And fascia is essentially the gap between the East and the West. As the scientific culture merges with the Asian and Chinese cultures as far as medicine goes, you're going to see more and more respect applied to fascia because it's one of the most important tissues of the body, and up until this point it's been completely disrespected and ignored. So how does one change their fascia? Well, if we started early at age 4 and just did yoga, we wouldn't have the aging problems we have today, but we miss out on all the sports and all the activities and all the hiking and backpacking and cycling and whatnot. And so most of us have to learn a better way to take care of ourselves. So that's why I highly recommend regular yoga classes, because yoga will warm the tissues of the body and lengthen the muscles of the fascia, keeping them in a warm liquid state. And that's what we're trying to do over time. So a yoga teacher who is 90 years old, who's been practicing yoga for 40 or 50 years, is quite different than a weightlifter. Yoga teacher may have very little health issues as far as hip issues or knee issues because they've been practicing lengthening and opening their fascia tissues. The other way is through fascia body work. There's many types of fascia body work, but a practitioner like myself will put their hands on you and actually stretch the fascia. And what I do in my work, I peel away the layer, one layer at a time, much like carving away at the tree and peeling away all the hard fascias. And many times we start to unravel old stories of old injuries that have been buried and old patterns that have been ignored. And those two ways are some of the best ways to care for your fascia. So there's a revolution happening right now, and fascia is the beginning of it. So there's all kinds of ways to change your life and your health, and the first step is to make your fascia important. So thank you for watching this video. I surely appreciate it. There's more videos on fascia to come after this. Please subscribe to my channel if you like to follow me and follow me with more leading edge videos. Or you can visit me at my website, johnburras.com, for more leading edge information. Thank you.